As I said earlier, we're trying, because we've had lots of feedback that people like the networking, they like the Q&A, they like the interaction, and we've actually had in our sort of 2 or 3 years of recent history a few panel sessions which have gone reasonably well. I thought we would start trying them again. So I've asked Neil Ritson, who's CEO of Leni Gas and Oil, Greg Coleman, who you heard about from Henry, is MD of Petromall, and Terry Quinn, who's manager for the whose regional managership includes the Africa region, had the pleasure of being kicked out of Libya in 1969.
70.
And is responsible for Geokinetics operations. So, thought putting a relatively independent panel looking into North Africa and trying to answer 2 or 3 questions. One is, are there still great opportunities there, and what do you see them as? Based on what you know, do you think it is possible to work there? If your company was contemplating activity today, what would you think? And ultimately, what do you guess the IOCs are going to do? I mean, what is BP or Shell or an Exxon going to do in North Africa now? Because one of the things that host governments always forget is that majors have other choices. There are always other places on the planet you can go. If you don't like North Africa, you can go to West Africa. If you don't like West Africa, you can go to East Africa. If you don't like Africa, you can go to Southeast Asia. There's always another choice you can make. If you're a small company committed to, say, Libya, that's not true. But if you're a big company, plenty of choice. And the plenty of choice remains. So, Greg, why don't you start?
Okay.
And the microphones are fine, I think.
Okay. I think a couple of thoughts. One is that it's clear from we've seen in Algeria that there's a great degree of complacency in the way that things have been run. The other extreme, which I've often been accused of, is paranoia, worrying about everything to the point where you don't do anything. And I think that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind. Eventually there will be a solution because it's in the interest of these countries for oil and gas to be produced. On the other side, Libya was a good example that Matt made, that the negotiations went from one extreme to another. It was a win-lose situation for the international oil companies in the early phase of exploration in Libya, and have gone now to a phase where it's a win-lose, but now the government's winning the financial benefits and the IOCs have been losing. So I'd argue that there needs to be a middle ground here. And at the end of this, it all comes back to the people that are involved. Especially sitting here in this lecture theater, we tend to forget that the people that we're actually working for are the people that are working in the operations. We can sit here and plan fantastic exploration programs in Lebanon, but the reality is someone has to go and drill the wells, produce the gas, build the facilities, operate in a place that is not known to be the kind of security that we have here in this particular city and this particular country. So I think, I'd argue, and hopefully you saw that from Henry's presentation, that needs to have a much more holistic approach to our endeavors, and that we need to take into account the needs of the people where we're working, our own people, and our investors. And quite often we get focused in on, let's have a fantastic exploration program, almost to the neglect of all of the other factors.
All right, thank you, Greg. Neil, you have a history of being involved with a company that was in Algeria a while ago, and now in another company, or a couple of companies that are not. How would you look at it, and how would you think about potential involvement, perhaps?
I think my credentials for being here are from the past rather than from the present, because I think Algeria in particular is not a country that a small independent can pursue. The government take is too high, the costs of operation are way beyond those that we can consider. So, I'm thinking more out of the the large cap and an IOC arena. And I would probably sum up the answer to your two questions is there's huge opportunity and we'll always find a way. There may be a period when people go offshore. That's often a response to unstable security situations. We saw it in West Africa. We'll see it, I think, possibly here in North Africa, that the focus of IOC activity may move to the offshore area for a period. We will see accommodation by the governments. We've already seen the Algerians cancel the additional taxation that they had in place. So we'll see a response from the countries, we'll see a response from the organizations. There will be a reassessment. Clearly we've become complacent. I mean, my period in Algeria for 6 years was in the dark, in the black decade, and we had a very different view of day-to-day security than was clearly now present. But those move in cycles. You need a wake-up call. You want it to be better, and then when it isn't, you tighten up again. So I think there's vast opportunity across the whole region, from everything from exploration to EOR. Whether EOR is delivering, I think, is partly because there's plenty of other opportunities, and we'll always find a way. The industry is very vibrant and very resilient. Whatever is thrown at us, it generally is something we'll overcome.
Okay. And Terry, I mean, Greg mentioned, yes, people are out there drilling wells and building infrastructure, but people shooting seismic are out in the boonies, really, right on the frontier.
That's right.
Yeah. So and you've been involved in real-time field operations in one or two of these countries, and now you're in a company that is asked to do that. How do you feel?
I mean, I agree with Neil. North Africa has vast hydrocarbon potential. It really does. And then to the north of it, they've got this vast market of Europe. So it's really, all things considered, it may be the place to be, but all things considered make it really a quite difficult place to be. I mean, I've been in the service industry, the seismic industry, for a very long time. And there are places I will go and there are places I won't go. Now, specifically on North Africa, doing business in these different countries, let's start with Egypt. The EGBC is very restrictive on service companies. You have to sort of be there to do business. Libya, Libya has gone through various stages over the years. I was there, as you've heard, from at the first time of the first revolution. Fortunately, I just missed out on the second revolution, being there. Libya is up in the air at the moment. We won't be going back there. We had a seismic crew in there. It was marooned in the desert for many, many months. We pulled it out. So we're not doing business in Libya right now. NOC, mentioned before, NOC is a roadblock in Libya. So they somehow need to loosen up on their involvement with the foreign oil companies in Libya, and then things will steadily improve. Algeria is my most recent experience, and I have to say I started going to Algeria in 2002, but I didn't start doing business in Algeria until 2007. It takes a long time. It can take a long time to do business. And what's very important about Algeria particularly is building relationships. So first, take your time. Don't get impatient. Don't get frustrated. Just keep at it. Build the relationships, and then once those relationships are there, they have confidence in you, they like what you do, then business will go that way. So it might be interesting too for those companies that haven't been there, that they are reintroducing a new tendering procedure, and it's a scoring system. They used it before, and then because of the corruption situation in Algeria, they went back to the lowest bidder. Now they're reintroducing a scoring system, which means you get 70% of the points for the technical part of your proposal, and you get 30% of the score for your commercial offer. So they're trying to find value for money. They're trying to find the best supplier of whatever it is, the product, the service, and get value for money. That's a big change and a big improvement.
What about, have you had business in Tunisia, for example?
We had a crew in Tunisia for some time, but since the, shall we say, the revolution in Tunisia, no crew there. I would say actually that my view is that, and some may disagree, that Algeria is probably the most stable right now of the 4 countries, possibly with the exception of Morocco. I haven't considered Morocco. But of the 3 countries, Algeria, Libya and Egypt, I really feel better about Algeria than I do about the other 2.
Okay. All right, now let me, as I say, this is all quite experimental, really. So what I plan to do now is to see if any of you have any questions. Please, Peter Ratti. He's not a pensioner, by the way. He just it doesn't even look like one. Sorry, I couldn't insult you, Peter.
Hi, guys. Question to the panel, please. Neil, you mentioned your view that certainly today it's a sort of high market cap, large, company province. I just wonder what the panel's views are going forward. Are there opportunities for low cap, exploration focused companies that aren't fully integrated E&P companies? We saw from Oswald's first presentation where just finding those barrels can have the biggest impact on your share price. If that's what you're fundamentally interested in, is there a future in the next decade in this region for those companies?
I guess the easy answer is they should be. There should always be an integrated chain from NOC down to all the way down to the juniors. There should be a role, particularly where new plays are being looked for. That is often, where on the exploration side, the small independent with more independent thinking can play a role. But I think while security is a major issue, I think it will be very hard to justify to small company boards how they're going to allocate the kind of resources when, as Greg says, there are other places to go. So they should be in a stable environment. There should be a place for everybody. Stable not just from a security point of view, but fiscally and so on. Tunisia has generally provided that opportunity, and there has been a wide spectrum of engagement with Tunisia over the years, and as a result, it's labelled as mature by Bernstein's this morning. So that's what happens when you let everybody loose. But for the time being, honestly, Peter, I can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
We do see, though, that Egypt has quite a plethora of smaller companies, very successful companies, and a lot of indigenous companies as well, operators. And I think that's maybe one of the things that both Libya and Algeria could do is encourage more private indigenous companies who can learn from their IOC partners. And actually, I think if the NOC, in the case of Libya and Sonatrach, could actually force that to happen, I think that the industry would be more stable, and I think that you could see more implementation of technology that I think is sadly lacking in all of these countries. And eventually it needs to lead to EOR if they're going to get the maximum reserves out.
Terry, do you
There are relatively small companies actually operating in Algeria. I mean, case in point, it was Petroceltic, the Irish company. So you could call that a sort of low cap company. I think Neil's right. Right now, I think it's probably the majors, would be more comfortable doing business in places like Algeria and Libya.
Okay.
I think so.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, if nobody else, we'll draw that to an end. Thank you, gentlemen, for your contribution. One more contribution to make. Yeah.